particularly liked the idea of Kundalini, that Sri Aurobindo and the mother understood that the Kundalini of this could rise through all the chakras and reach Sahasrara right here, that it could reach the highest realm right here, and that even matter itself could transform in a gradual fashion into divine matter. That's why the tradition is called divine materialism. That's why the tradition is called divine materialism, because of that focus and understanding. And you can tantric texts like those in the Kashmir Shaiva tradition, and you can take them from the Bengali Shakta tradition, and you will find that what they say about the nature of things is very, very close to the understanding of Sri Aurobindo and Mother. You can say that they have a direct heritage in the and certain kinds of tantric traditions. I don't want to, define tantrism or to delimit tantrism too much, because nobody really knows what tantrism is, in a way. There's no good definition for it. And even self-identified tantrics can have different philosophies. Not every tantric has a non-dual philosophy. There are tantric philosophies that are purely dualistic, okay, that are purely dualistic. And what does dualism mean? That the self, that the individual selves are distinct from the ultimate reality eternally. That's dualism. Non-dualism is that the individual selves are non-dual with the ultimate reality. They are the ultimate reality in another form, and also manifestation in another form. Now, just in terms of one idea that I've been working on, thinking about Sri Aurobindo's notion of evolution, that his understanding was, a relatively, pretty scientific one, looking at the evolution of the universe, starting with matter, and life emerges from matter, and then mind emerges, consciousness expands out of life, and there's a sort of a natural progression in terms of the evolution of the universe. So, those who know about Western philosophy would sort of find something Hegelian in Sri Aurobindo. They might find something even Darwinian in Sri Aurobindo. But I wanted, just for an exercise, to derive Sri Aurobindo's evolutionary theory from Indian tradition itself. So this is how you would do it. First of all, you have to understand one of the things that the mother was doing, and she was the second stage of the consciousness rocket, you could say, that was going off into the higher realms of spiritual discovery. Sri Aurobindo, I think, is the only guru I ever heard. No, I didn't make it to the ultimate. I didn't make it. Mother will make it. That's what he said. What the mother understood, and obviously Sri Aurobindo is there, life and then afterlife, assisting her. She understood that that the entire was her body, and not only the entire universe was in her body. And if you get into the esoteric writings, this is where things get mysterious, because she begins to do yoga with her body. There's this great Mind in the Cells by Satprem that describes this process. She is trying to transform what she calls the dark parts in her body, the dark realms in her body, the hidden, mysterious, and troubled realms in her body, to clarify them so as to change everything in the universe. So as to change everything in the universe, and to make it possible for the light to shine through. Because all the mystics know about the light. It's right there behind the veil. And what the mother was trying to do was to open the curtains. That's what the descent of the supramental consciousness was about, was opening the curtain. Okay, well, I'm still talking about the notion of evolution. What is this about? Well, generally speaking, the traditions that you found in India or around the world tended to think of individual liberation. Now, no doubt there were epiphenomenal social positives to anyone's liberation. Anybody who happened to get to the highest level of insight anywhere will, because of non-locality, obviously affect others. So there really isn't as much separation as that. But theoretically speaking, each person sought their own liberation. In Buddhism, they used to refer to a person who reached their own nirvana as a pratyeka Buddha, a Buddha who had gotten to liberation on their own. But then in later Buddhism, there was an emphasis on what they called the bodhisattva. And the bodhisattva wouldn't take liberation until all the rest of the world was saved. So they would actually take on the ordeal of an infinite number of lives. That is what you call compassion. So what Mother was doing was not a notion of pratyeka Buddha. It was a notion of the idea that that all of the universe can be transformed by one yogi. And so what that means is that in the process of the yoga, all of what we know is changed. Now that's a process of evolution. It's a participation in a process of evolution that takes a traditional line. It doesn't have to be taken from Hegel, and it doesn't have to be taken from Darwin. It's the idea that it's a tantric idea that because a developed yogi understands themselves as the entire universe, the old tantric tradition would have that person get liberation and maybe give some grace to people here and there. But essentially they were trying to break the bonds of birth and rebirth for themselves. But what Mother was trying to do was to try to break the bonds of birth and rebirth for everybody. It was a bodhisattva version of Tantrism. It's a bodhisattva version of Tantrism. And so the evolutionary aspect and the notion of transformation in Sri Aurobindo and Mother can be derived, it seems to me, if you want to do the exercise, from traditional Indian philosophy and does not need to have a Western add-on to it. Okay, so a second element in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy that was most important is that his philosophy really was organized around the Bhagavad-Gita, the great Indian text, of course, which is a non-sectarian Bible in a sense in India. It is really a text that everyone has reference to. Doesn't matter if you're Vaishnava, Shaiva, or Shakta. Everyone reads Gita, recites Gita, and understands it as salvational. So it's a very, very central and important text. And Sri Aurobindo really took his inspiration in the integral yoga from the Bhagavad-Gita. In fact, this whole notion of synthesis of yogas really, I think, comes about because he saw in the Gita 3 types of yogas intertwined. A jnana yoga, a cognitive type yoga that had a mentalistic aspect to it, you might say. The bhakti yoga that had an emotional aspect to it. And karma yoga, a yoga of action that had a bodily aspect to it. If you want to recite the mantra from the Institute, Body, Mind, Spirit, this really comes from, in part, it's a longer litany in Sri Aurobindo's thought, but that notion really comes from the Bhagavad-Gita as Sri Aurobindo understood it. And by the way, I think he has the best commentary on Gita. I read the Gita a lot. I teach a course on it now. The Bhagavad-Gita, ancient and modern commentaries. And I look at all the old Sanskrit commentaries. Of course, we do them in English for the class. And then the modern commentators. And you find out that almost everybody wants to interpret Bhagavad-Gita monolithically. They want to say the yoga of Gita is really the yoga of knowledge. And all others are subsidiary to it. That's one view. The other people say, no, 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 it's devotion, it's bhakti yoga. That is the real yoga of Gita, and all the others are subsidiary to it. Mahatma Gandhi later on says karma yoga is the only yoga of Gita, and all the others are subsidiary to it. This has been the tendency of traditional commentators, but really, if you look at it carefully, I think Sri Aurobindo's argument is best in terms of the Gita, that these yogas are meant to be intertwined and not to be separate in thought, distinct from each other. In fact, in one of the chapters of Gita at the beginning, Arjuna asked the question, well, which is better? Basically, it boils down to, is it jnana yoga or bhakti yoga? And Krishna says, well, really, both of them work. Both of them work. You don't have to think of them exclusively. And in fact, every point that Krishna gets answered a yes or no question, he says both and. He tries to integrate. And I think that is the case with the three yogas of Gita, which become central to Sri Aurobindo's thought, because he understands that that you can't just focus on the mental aspect of being. That's not going to get you there. You can't just focus on your heart. That's not really completely going to get you there. You can't just focus on action and the body. That's not really going to get you there. They have to be put into an integral whole. And all aspects of being have to be developed to create the integral divine life. All aspects of being have to be developed, not just one of them as the supreme rescue. So the Bhagavad-Gita is central, and of course the whole notion of yoga there, which underlies it. It's really sort of a Patanjali yoga. It's sort of a yoga, a Raja yoga as it's called. Might even be called Sankhya yoga. I know this is technical now for those who don't know those terms, but the basic ideas of yoga being developing a certain type of focus on the higher realities within oneself, and developing an aspiration for a higher development of being in a focused way. That's yoga. Focus. So much of it is just that. Practice that orientation as often as you can. Might be in the elevator. Might be in your car. Might be when you least expect it. You don't know. But that is Sri Aurobindo's relationship to the Bhagavad-Gita. And then the fuller Vedic tradition. Of course, people focus on the Upanishads, but I like to say, and I think the tradition agrees with me, that the Upanishads are non-different from the Vedas themselves. That the Upanishads are really the culmination and the essence. If the Vedas, which are the most ancient texts of India, are the butter, then the Upanishads are the ghee. They are the clarified butter. That's the idea. But that doesn't mean, Sri Ramakrishna talks about the manifest divine worshiping icons and the divine as unmanifest, as the difference between water and ice. The difference between water and ice. That basically it's the same thing, but in a different form. So that's the Upanishads. So I focus less on the Upanishads here because they, of course, they have the higher notions of non-duality and of the notions of oneness of the individual self and the ultimate. There are some renunciatory aspects to the Upanishads that I think get overemphasized. My argument would be that they aren't as renunciatory as people try to make them out to be. There's some passages there. But in general, they follow Vedic thought. And what is Vedic thought? That we live in a divine realm in this manifest world. That we live in a divine realm in this manifest world, and we know that there is a transcendent behind it that we have to engage, or we're lost. We have to engage, or we're lost. And so, so you'll find in the Vedic collections themselves, many old mantras, you'll find that date back to, well, at least 1500 BCE, maybe further than that, containing ancient wisdom, that life is very important. You know, life is not something that you want to escape from, I will argue. Very hard to find in any of the Vedic mantras a notion that you should escape life. You should escape ignorance about the understanding of what's here, perhaps, but you don't want to escape life. The mantras of the Veda ask for better life, for health, for happiness, for good family, for a good community. That's the kind of things that the Vedas ask for. So I would say that Sri Aurobindo really is directly in alignment with my interpretation of the Vedas. And darn it, I know I'm right, you know. But if one understands the Vedas in this way, then he is in pure alignment with the Vedic understanding. And so that would be, you know, those are the three highlights, I would say, of the connection or the roots of Sri Aurobindo's thought in Indian tradition. I don't think you can put them in any particular order. The Shakta Tantric, the Bhagavad-Gita, and the Vedas. I think that's it.
We do have a couple of minutes for questions. Hopefully we will keep your talk intact. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Yes, go ahead. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes. Yes.
You know, it's not about cows and horses and and goats and stuff. But what is it that what was the deeper meaning which was behind it? And I think that's a great contribution.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Any otherwise? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
This is Kartik Patel, or Dr. Kartik Patel, good friend and colleague, and of course many of you know him. He's been around for a while, and now for quite a few years has been at ITP. He founded or was the dean of the Global Online Program. He also served as vice president of the Cultural Integration Fellowship. So Kartik's going to talk a little bit about the Indian background, but bring it into the integral and